thank you all for coming today. I didn't realize this was one after lunch, so if you feel a little sleepy from me, I apologize.
Late lunch.
Just let the sleepiness take you away, and I'll be here later for questions. I mean, just go with it, right, when you get a good nap in. I will be talking about scaling and maintaining front-end distribution today, and the benefits that come from that, the trade-offs, and the governance is an important word. We'll be talking about that today. Just a quick overview. I'm just going to introduce what a front-end distribution is, because I feel like we might have just made up like this term, front-end distribution, for what is really just a bunch of collection of processes and tools and teams working together. I think the panel this morning was your teams need to work together, not just the developers, not just the editors, not just the designers, working in silos, right? I think that seems to be a theme that we're talking about today. And I'll talk about, how did we get here? Why am I talking about a front-end distribution? And I'll go through a story time with Company X, which was my fictional company up until a few weeks ago, but I haven't changed it out of spite. I'm not changing my slides. And then options to consider when I go into what a front-end distribution is. Like, there's many different flavors we can do. As in tech, there's always hundreds of ways to implement something or different approaches. So we'll chat about a few of those, then we'll go into a technical deep dive of one of the options in particular, and then we'll have some questions. Okay, so what is a front-end distribution? For now, I've kind of already mentioned it is a collection of processes and tools and people working together to scale a front-end delivery. And when I say the word delivery, I'm not talking about scaling like a load balancing to manage traffic on a Black Friday. I'm talking about scaling delivery of new features, new components for your users on your store. And I'm coming from an e-commerce context here, so everything I'm really talking about is focusing on the e-commerce world. And where it really plays into here is the content on the e-commerce store, the CMS side of things, right? That's a slice of every single e-commerce store has content. That's how users find and navigate through your products, and the menu structure, like you can take all that data and put it into a CMS. And I'll really be focusing on like a front-end distribution here is for multi-brand organizations or teams who support multiple brands. So if you're in that category, or you know someone in that category, that this is something they could start thinking about if they're having difficulties scaling their teams or their tools to make a more efficient front end. So what I hope you get from today, I hope I can give you some confidence, at least point you like in the direction to start looking and investigating. Mostly ideas is what I'm going to give you today. I'll talk about a couple tools with some ways we can do things with Git. I also hope to give you some key factors and questions to take back, because really it's the conversations with your organization, with your teams. That is the most important thing. Like, can we do this? Can we even attempt to try to do what I'm going to get into later on here? And why am I here? So as mentioned earlier, I'm at Orium, and I build a front-end accelerator for companies coming into the headless, composable commerce space. And the CMS is one part of those, part of the APIs that companies, they get off their platform, how they manage their content in this composable space. I also maintain brands on Shopify, and this gives me a kind of a foot in both worlds, because Shopify is a platform, and there's lots of things I like about Shopify, but because they're a platform, they've made thousands of decisions for me already on how I can work, how I can build inside their system, and how I deliver my storefront to my users. So some of those decisions that they've made, I can't change. I have to kind of work against the flow sometimes. And when I'm working in the composable commerce space, I have absolute freedom to do what I want, when I want, and where I want, and I choose how my front end is delivered to my customers. So I think it gives me a bit of good perspective. I think it's easy to just keep going forward into what's coming new and kind of forget where we came from. Because Shopify is also evolving, right? They're also building. So the question is like, why not choose Shopify today? Why should I choose Shopify today? There's still a lot of important questions most organizations still ask. Okay, so why, eventually, we're going to be talking about the front-end distribution, but why should we even think about that in the first place? Why are we decoupling? And I'm going to start with platforms. So a Shopify is an e-commerce platform, and the next evolution of that is your decoupled front end. So platforms, I love platforms. I think they're awesome. You know, I can launch a Shopify store or something on like Oracle Cloud, Magento. These platforms really reduce the barrier of entry for launching an e-commerce brand. And it's because they've made all these decisions, right? So I can easily work within their system. I have a theme that I can install. I have apps from the marketplace I can put on my store. It's going to add all this custom functionality. But then you get this walled garden approach where, because they've made all those decisions, now I have to kind of, if I want to go and create some more rich customer experiences on my storefront, I might hit a wall with what I'm trying to do. Especially like when I think of server-side rendering on Shopify, I have to work within their Liquid, which is kind of like template language. And when I decouple, now I have a full freedom of choice of my front end, the technologies I use to deliver. So now I could use React. Shopify's actually done something already in the space called Hydrogen, where they've given you a React app, and you can it connects to their API already for you. So they're already recognizing that this is something happening, gaining momentum here. But I think it's also important to recognize when you decouple that you do it, and I don't think this is mentioned too much. I think I really want to try to stress this point where when you do decouple and get off of a platform, you do incur a lot of what was handled behind the scenes by the platform for you that you might not even know about. So something for Shopify, for example, all my orders, all my customers, all my inventory, all my content is in one place, so I can train one user how to use Shopify. And they're going to have a decent time managing that content. But now when I decouple, and especially when I go to the composable commerce space, all my information lives in different microservices now. So I have to, the dev work required to hook up the storefront experience here, really, your costs go up a lot. And I think companies, there have been surprises going to this direction, getting off of their platform. Some companies aren't ready to take that on. There's lots of unknowns going into this space because we still are figuring it out. I think that was also something mentioned earlier. We still are figuring out how to best manage content and give good experiences for the editors, right, the users using a CMS. I know myself personally going into Contentful, now I'm working with a more complex data model. Things have content representing more child content. It's not as easy. I can't just see it all in one glance and see what my page is going to look like. And of course, this last point here, you can still consume the platform API when you decouple. So that's exactly what Shopify Hydrogen is. That's a good example there. And I'm from Orium, so we focus on composable commerce, so why not talk briefly about that? And the CMS is a slice of what we do every day. We also bring in search APIs, PIMs, product information management APIs. Then you have real commerce APIs, manage your inventory. You have loyalty, engagement APIs. There's a lot of companies coming into this space, so depending on your requirements, you get to pick and choose, right? That's the benefit of going composables. Now, I don't have to worry about only what Shopify can give me or only what Oracle Cloud Commerce can give me. Now I can pick based on what I need as a company. But, it's a full shift, right? I'm going away from a platform, now I have to connect data. Lots of times there's duplicate data living amongst the whole system, so I need to figure out what's the source of truth. What do I need to sync that to? How often do I need to sync it? Sometimes I'm listening to events that are occurring. Some companies have custom inventory systems that they've built in-house over the years, and those could tie into retail stores, physical locations, but now they want that inventory to also be available on their website. So now you have to figure out, how do I move all that data around? I think that's one of the hardest parts is companies moving off the platform and all the custom stuff they've built into the composable commerce space is figuring out all these things that they've built in-house and haven't documented very well. Now I have to go figure out, what did we build over the last 5 years? Half the engineers have left, maybe some who knew exactly how that worked. And then, developer like me is kind of trying to figure it out as we go. Okay. So when should you consider decoupling? When is a good point to do this? So just go back a little bit of the summary. The platforms have opinions, right? And these opinions, they've really made it quick and easy for me to launch a new website, or a new e-commerce website. There's that walled garden approach, though, this feature complexity cliff, where I might be fighting against it to implement something that could be really, really easy in a composable world, where I'm in more in control of how things work. But because I'm on the platform still, that can be pretty difficult. And if you find yourself working around these systems, these platforms, it's possible to strap on some external functionality, but over time, that will grow and grow, and you've got that tribal knowledge, these custom systems built. And often, engineers, we're not good at documenting things. I think that's a fair stereotype, so you often have undocumented things, and people are afraid to change things in that scenario. So maybe, at that point, it might be good to consider what you can gain from decoupling. So again, it's no small feat. I think every organization needs to be prepared for the cost of what they will incur, but is that less than the opportunity lost costs? If I can't reach new customers because I can't get new experiences on my storefront, is that costing me, or am I losing more money there than what I would pay more of a fixed cost to decouple? Okay, so now we're going to get into Company X. They are a fictional company here. They are a multi-branded e-commerce organization. They have multiple storefronts spread across. This is typical different e-commerce platforms. Maybe they've acquired brands over the years, and maybe some are completely custom, maybe one or two on Shopify, maybe one or two on Magento. So it's really hard to scale the delivery of that. How can they start creating more richer experiences for their customers on all their brands if their teams are all kind of working in silos? So if they want to grow those teams to be able to do more, they have to hire for each team and bring in folks who know those platforms, who are really good with working on those platforms. So silos, again, I think is a theme here we're all talking about. And these teams have built external features, these custom data flows, these syncs. I was talking to a company a few weeks ago, and they had their retail inventory and their online inventory, and there was a sync every 15 minutes occurring, keeping them up to date with each other. But sometimes that failed, and that was a nightmare scenario for their team to figure out how to roll things back. And this is some things the dev teams here at Company X, they're all working in silos, they're all building custom external features to their platform, working against the flow of those platforms. So they might hear, why are things taking now weeks instead of days? Why can't I use this new service on my storefront? So the composable, the headless API space there's a lot of players coming in to offer very focused experiences, something like loyalty points, user engagement, personalization, and these brands want to use those things on their storefront. Of course they do, and they should want to. And why are bugs increasing? Well, if I'm changing some undocumented external bolt-on thing that wasn't built very well and it's kind of cobbled together, there's definitely things that are going to pop up in production. And these teams, they have a lack of confidence. They have a fear of changing things. I certainly have a fear of changing things that I don't know how they work. As an engineer, I think that's a common trait. Okay, so that's looking, at the current state of the company. What should their goals be moving forward? How can they scale? How can they get into this front-end distribution? What goals should they have? So they should be, primary goal, we want to be more efficient. We want to stop building things multiple times for each brand. We want to build things in one place and use them across all our brands. We want to have a consistency in design. So typically, if you acquire brands over time and you're building into platforms, chances are your design, your theme behind those storefronts are all going to be different. But with efficiency and consistency, Flexibility is very important here as well, right? If you create something that's too strict for a brand to be truly unique from the other brands in your portfolio, then you're kind of building a walled garden again. So you need to make sure that your implementation is flexible, is customizable, and brands can grow and take what you've given them and really create unique experiences. And governance here is another really important one, and this is where all the teams in your organization need to work together, because now you have ownership. If you're all working to share assets together and to scale and efficiency, you need to have teams working together and talking and getting out of those silos. And those processes will be for creating and maintaining and deploying shared assets. And another one's training. Don't hire for a specific platform, just hire an engineer who knows your decoupled front-end tech stack, and they can jump right in. They can help any brand too, as certain brands need more resources. And composable here, I think that's been a word I mentioned a few times here. Composable commerce is the key here when I'm talking about e-commerce stores. So what are some options here that they can do? They can build a multi-tenant decoupled front end. So that's where my brain would first go. Okay, I have a decoupled code base, I have my favorite tech stack. I'm going to make it drive more than one brand. I'm going to use environment variables. I'm going to have if statements saying if it's brand A, show this component. If it's brand B, this is my homepage instead with all this different content. Number two here is I could create a decoupled starter template. So I could work with all the engineering teams in the company, figure out what tools, what stack they want to work with, create a starter template, think of a theme, a starting point, but also the code base, so Next.js site on Vercel or Remix, what's UI library am I going to use? I'm going to create some new components for my CMS, and I'll create this gold standard starter template that then each brand can take and start off on the same level footing. And I could also now, number three here, just takes number two a bit further, creates a starter template that consumes a set of shared assets. And the shared assets there, those were in the goals of company X as well, where efficiency, they want to create things once and share them to any brand. Okay, so option number one, just some points here. It's a single shared design system, and it's in a single code repository that encapsulates all the brand logic. I have some points like requires all brands using the same backend API. That's not a hard requirement, but you probably wouldn't want your brands using different commerce endpoints to drive the same front-end components, because that data coming in from different places, it's going to have a different data shape. You're going to have a different problem to solve in that scenario. But eventually, though, I think this will become difficult to modify, because can you imagine having 5, 6 brands running on the same code base? That's going to be, if I touch one line of code wrong, and I push that code, that could impact all my brands, right? So who owns this repository now? Maybe 1 or 2 of my brands really grows, and they want to start doing their own thing. They want to start changing more than taking the code in their own direction. But that will impact the other brands that this code powers. So who does that really own to? Who makes those decisions? So these are the governance questions that come out of this now. Who approves the changes? As the code base grows, delivery will slow, because you'll have to be doing testing across all of your brands when you're making changes. But I think there's a place for this. If you have brands that sell similar products, or they have a similar storefront experience, then I think this is still a good scenario. Okay, option number 2, those were the decoupled starter templates, so your gold standard. I think this is great. This is a good place to start. But then over time, each brand's going to take, they're going to be in their own code repository starting from step 1, each of them on their own journey. But then over time, those code bases are going to change significantly enough that you're going to kind of go back to the same issues you had with a platform approach, where each brand now has its own rules, its own custom solutions, maybe its own design now, and But if you wanted to allow like full flexibility, this would be, let's get everyone starting on the same foot. Now you go, you own this code now. This is yours. Brand A, you own this, and brand B, this is yours. See you later. So I'll just skip through those. Number 3, the starter templates. So your gold standard starter template, but you have shared assets that the starter template consumes. And that's where we think the most benefit of efficiency, consistency, and flexibility comes into. I'll talk about how this can still be flexible. And your training, you can hire a resource and they know how the shared assets should work, so they just have to go work with how each brand has implemented those shared assets. And yeah, you're duplicating effort that's done at a per brand level now, because if you're sharing this core set of shared assets, which are UI components, integrations, business logic, you can build that into the shared assets, and any brand has that now available to them, which is awesome. Okay, company next door, stoked. They went through the 3 options with us, and they want to do option 3. So now what do they actually do? How do we get started here? Now I think those conversations need to happen with the teams. So the important governing questions here are who owns the shared assets? Because that's going to be the hot topic. When one brand wants to change something significantly, what's the process? What happens? Is this a centralized set of shared assets? Like, is there a core team managing these assets? Or is it a decentralized approach where the expectation is all the brands using those assets should come in and spend 10% of their time updating and adding new features into those. So these questions, what happens when the brands start fighting? What happens when a bug is discovered? Who's going to jump on that? Because it's opportunity cost for each brand to stop working on their storefronts and come back to shared resources and fix the stuff that's going on. Okay, so now I'm going to go into, in a sec here, jump over into a different tool and walk through some diagrams. But before I go into that, just some of the technical stuff that can be used to achieve option 3, which was our starter templates with the shared code. So a monorepo to manage the shared code and packages. Monorepos have become very popular these days. I think any company should be using a monorepo or think about migrating to a monorepo now, because it really is great at isolating units of code in your package. And that doesn't apply just for like a multi-brand storefront. They are a very useful tool. You could use a package registry, so I could ship packages to something like NPM, so I could be updating my UI components if I wanted to be shipping those through a package registry, so that my brands have the choice of when to upgrade to the latest version of my UI components. I could have a command line interface that helps the brands keep their shared assets up to date with the shared assets from the shared top level. I'll get into what that looks like. And then, the flexibility. How do I still allow brands to be flexible and override or completely ignore features that are in those shared packages? And we'll talk about that as well. Completely customizing. Okay, so now I'll jump over here. Okay, I'm gonna have to go like this. So I like pictures, so this is what the shared assets are for all the brands. I have design here, so this could be like something in Figma. So my design team can be working in Figma, then I could implement that design into my core code assets. So this is we'll be able to be implementing the theme that specified the design, and then I would build UI components that consume those theme tokens. I haven't mentioned documentation too much yet, but I think this is something that is also part of the shared assets, a set of documentation on how all of these things work together to build the storefront. And your best practices, your standards to follow, stuff like that. Automation as well can be in the shared assets. And then now I'm just gonna get into focus mainly on the design and the core code. Really, this is what we're gonna go into, is how I can share what's in my core code. So my design has my theme settings, my UI components. It'll take those two and build pages and experiences. And then that's what the developers have to go and implement into the code. So here's my starter template. This is my gold standard. Here's my documentation folder. This could be something like Docusaurus. And then my packages. So I have my theme, implemented my components, some business logic. I might have a checkout app that I want to manage through a package. And most important thing here is the integrations. So the integrations to the CMS, to my commerce layer, to my search, to my loyalty, an external product information management system, or a third party like custom in-house built thing that would be in here. Okay. So this is, I'm going to do 3 variants of option 3. So 3 variants of the starter kit, starter templates with shared assets. So let me, just going to zoom in. Here we go. So the word monorepo there, that's really critical here. So my monorepo has all my brands and core packages all in a single monorepo. And this is very similar to that multi-tenant option we looked at earlier. But now I have these shared packages that all the brands consume. And all the brands, they started off of the starter template, my gold standard. So here I have brand A and brand B. Let me make this look bigger. Here we go. So this is after like kicking off from the starter template. Here's brand A, here's brand B down below. They're the exact same. But over time, let's say 6 months in, brand A has started creating a bunch of custom business logic, custom components, custom integrations. They're still using the shared core packages, the shared assets from back here, right? So there's still this efficiency of creating things once, but now they've created their own, right? So now, ideally, this is where the governance comes in, because you can't just go down this path and expect things will take care of themselves, but now the governance has to be every 2 months, every 3 months, or after a certain life cycle, these customizations that brand A has built, we got to bring that back up into the core monorepo folders so the other brands can now consume these things, right? I think it's good and expected that each brand would start, prototyping their own experiences in their own storefronts, creating their own integrations, and then the company at the higher level between all the teams, they would discuss which ones they want to bring back into the core, so then hopefully, after a year, brand A is now just consuming these core packages again. And that looks really nice. And this is a viable solution, but those questions of, well, what if brand B really wants to go in a very different direction, then their dependencies from the core will start to just minimize over time, and eventually they'll have their own custom code base. Which, how does that work when we have a monorepo, where if I push this whole repository to Vercel and they deploy it based on environment variables, every single time I change a piece of code in here, it could trigger a CI/CD pipeline to redeploy all of my brands and all my front ends. That's the downside of this, is all living within a same monorepo. So that's the first variant. Now let's go to variant 2. So now I have very, very similar in starter template. I have core packages, but now instead of those core packages being consumed and having all my brands live in the same monorepo, I'm going to ship those packages to NPM. And each brand has its own code repository. So here's my shared core assets. The starter template's the most common thing between all these options here. This is your starting point, so if a new brand comes in, they would start at this place and time. And my core packages now, they're going to go to NPM. So now here's some just sample packages you could have. My UI components, my more composed components maybe, my theme, my CMS integration, my OMS integration, my commerce integration. And now the brands, they're monorepos. They're also a monorepo, each of these brands. They have their own front-end code living isolated from each other. They import these packages for NPM, and then they'll build that into their front end. So now if something needs to change, like one of these components needs to change, or a new component, the brands would need to come back into this monorepo, update those packages in here, and then release a new version to NPM. And then they would install the latest version, whatever they published it as, into their code base. So let's say brand A did that process, they really overhauled the theme, and they maybe did a major version update to version 3, but brand B, they could still be all happy living in version 2 for a while. So they get to choose when they upgrade. And that's one of the biggest benefits from the first option, where all of these shared assets were living inside the same code base as the brand frontends themselves. This, the downside here though is this isn't very flexible. What if brand B wants some unique customizations to these integrations? And I should also say it is really difficult building a library to be consumed by different people. It's easy to build a library consumed by one entity, but if as soon as you have more than one brand, 2, 3, 4 brands, they're all going to want to do something slightly different here. So you could build in, lifecycle hooks before update, after calling this procedure, before calling this procedure. But then that just becomes noise of now you're maintaining and building a library instead of actually delivering your storefront and building new experiences. That's the goal of what the brands actually want to do. So what is our third option going to be? So very similar, just a little slight difference here. We still have starter templates with packages. Each brand is in its own code repository. But now instead of shipping to NPM or any package manager in general, we're going to use Git subtrees to share code. So a Git subtree, think of it as you have a parent repo and a child repo, and you can just run a Git command to say, this folder in my Git repo actually belongs and lives up in here. The benefit of doing that is I can pull changes in from the parent repo when I want to. I can also change my local copy of that folder in my own repo. So each brand can customize the components and their integrations in their own repository, and when they're ready, they can sync it back up, or they can also bring down the latest changes in case that's happened while they've been customizing their own copy. So I feel like my pictures got simpler and simpler as I went on here. So here's my core packages, here's brand A and brand B again, and now I'm using subtrees to bring in those core packages from the top level core monorepo, and now they can just consume those, and if there's a bug or they want to add a slight change or slight tweak, some business logic, they can now do that directly in their code base. But there should still be a life cycle here. If these brands are modifying the core copy in their own repository, there should be a cycle here. So the first step would be, pulling from the core into the brand. Now they have a copy. Over time, though, they want to bring this back into the core to gain that level of efficiency, so you can build things once and then make them available for all of your brands. And this is the ultimate flexibility here. You have a core with consistent design, and implementation of that design with core components, integrations. Your brands can pull that in, and now they can actually tweak it as well to whatever they need to. So we're getting that flexibility. There's some governance here, and yeah, this is our favorite. So we actually, at Orium, we used to work with number 2 up here. We used to ship to NPM. But we realized, why are we doing this? Why are we trying to create a library here? We're trying to allow our customers to accelerate their front-end delivery to creating new and rich experiences. And we found these were just slowing us down and slowing our customers down, because now we have to tell them how to upgrade to these new packages, right? Or the deprecations, what do we remove? And that's not our goal at Orium. Our goal is to allow a company to take our front-end accelerator and really turn it into something that they can control and that they own. Okay, that's the walkthrough there. So again, let's just quickly review our goals here. Efficiency, consistency, flexibility. We need to have governance. We want to improve our training, our onboarding for new resources. And we want to be able to be composable. We want to be able to pull from any system that any brand wants to be able to do, bring into their storefront. So now it's like, should I do this? Should I actually go down this path? And I think the answer to everything in life, especially in tech, is it depends. It depends on your organization. Going back to earlier, are your teams working in silos? Are they good at working together? Maybe to do some organizational rehaul to make your teams work together better, to break them out of their silos before you adopt this approach. Depends on your current state. Are you having a good time right now on your platform? If the answer is mostly yes, then you should probably just consider sticking to it. But if you're starting to fight that walled garden, you're hitting these feature complexity cliffs because you want to break out of what the platform can do, then what are your future goals? Do you want to try to achieve efficiency and be flexible, but also have this consistency to control your branding across all of your brands? And as I mentioned, these are really similar to how we've built and how we currently build. We're always iterating on our front-end accelerator at Orium. Thank you. That was what I wanted to share about today. Appreciate your time. Any questions?
So, and I apologize, I'm not much of a developer these days, but you said clients need to be able to use the starter template. How does that work with the mono repo? Do they have access to that? Or is this, can you just briefly speak to that?
So, yeah, the story I told with company X is like they build and maintain their own starter template, and each brand can initialize from that starter template. At Orium, we know our accelerator is the starter template that we would give to an e-commerce brand. Say, here's how we work with it, here's all of our documentation we built around it, here's how you can go start connecting it. We would do a lot of that work as well. That's how they accelerate their journey into that space. We've got the glue, we've got a high-performing storefront experience already. We work with vendors in the composable commerce space to bring that organization into the next phase of their e-commerce journey. Does that answer?
It does. I have a follow-up
Yeah.
to that. Do you have someone from your team maintain this software? Like, is this a sole person's job, or is this?
I'm on the product team at Orium. I have 4 full-time developers focused on building the accelerator. And so over time, it's always growing, and we're always reshifting our opinions on how a team can best start in the composable commerce space. So we're not building a library, we're building at any given point in time, like this is our accelerator that you can start on, and 6 months might go by, and you could look, most of the time, built new features, but in a year, 2 years, it could be very different because some of the stuff Jesus was saying, something like Nacelle, Netlify Connect, those are new ways of thinking of how do I get all my data all into one place, and then how do I serve multiple front ends based on that unified set of data. So it could look like that in 2 years, 3 years, but the nice thing about the accelerator is we can always the space is changing so fast that we are always saying, here's a great starting point for today, and if it takes you a year to get there, we'll still be here. We can share with you what we've learned, what we've built. Our clients get access to that code once they've started a project with us. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.